Okay, good afternoon, good evening. I am Fouad Ben Ahmed from Rabat, Morocco. I am so happy to introduce our colleague and friend Therese Druart to present her paper on justice in al-Farabi. Therese Druart is the fifth speaker this year after having a successful series of conferences last year. We had the chance to have Charles Butterworth and Muqdad and Luis Javier Lopez, and I'm so optimistic that and so happy that we will have the chance also to invite other colleagues in the next few months. I'm so pleased that Therese Druart accepted my invitation to give her lecture. Therese Druart is one of the greatest scholar, in the field of philosophy in Muslim context. We can use also Islamic Arabic philosophy, but I prefer this philosophy in Muslim context. She combines 3 or 4 fields. She is very familiar with ancient philosophy, Muslim Arabic philosophy, and religious also traditions. From the Islamic, the Muslim context, and also from the other traditions. Therese Druart got her PhD in philosophy from Université catholique de Louvain, s'il vous plaît, in 1973. Congratulations! It was like last year, and she's well known for her let's say annual bibliography on Islamic philosophy. She's I can say that this work is really amazing because she provides us with let's say we can say that an exhaustive bibliography on what is published at least in 4 or 5 languages. I'm also happy that we have that some colleagues and friends accepted my invitation to join us to comment and to attend and to comment and to discuss the paper presented by Anne-Therese Druart. Cher Anne-Therese Druart, the floor is yours, please. You have at least 50 minutes, of presentation. Then we will have some discussion after that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Fouad, for your kind introduction. I must say that what I will present is not a complete picture, and I hope a bit to pick up the brains of the other people to complete the picture. So be patient with me. It's not a perfectly complete, exhaustive look at the topic. Doing justice to al-Farabi's views on justice is not easy. First, he does not offer a systematic or detailed account of justice. And one has to piece it together from scattered references in various texts. This, of course, explains why little has been written on this subject, at least focusing on it. Second, is the second teacher claims that philosophy reached its perfection with Aristotle. One expects him to follow his master rather closely. Aristotle dedicated only one full book of his Nicomachean Nicomachean ethics to a moral virtue, namely justice. So he really put emphasis on justice and therefore gave pride of place to it. Al-Farabi does not do so. Besides, in some text, al-Farabi speaks of God's justice. Though in Nicomachean Ethics 10:8, Aristotle claimed that attributing acts of justice to the gods would be ridiculous. Still more puzzling, in a couple of texts, the second teacher gives at some length an account of justice in the cosmological system, among the four elements and among natural but non-human beings, even inanimate ones, that seems rather alien to Aristotle's own account. The three un-Aristotelian features of al-Farabi's views on justice that I have listed, the minor role given to justice in human life, i.e. human justice, the attribution of justice to the first, or God, i.e. divine justice, and the inclusion of what I shall call natural justice, cannot be mainly explained by omissions or mistakes in the Arabic version of the Nicomachean Ethics. I checked. The relevant passages are in the translation as we have it. Besides, one should note that Miskawai, who of course is come a bit after Farabi, not that much after, they overlap a bit, in the refinement of character, present an account of human justice much closer to that of Aristotle. And yet, in a less well-known text on the nature of justice, he leaves aside human justice and gives an account of what he called natural and divine justice, alien to the views of Aristotle, but with some similarities to that of al-Farabi. These similarities indicate that for natural justice, both al-Farabi and Miskawai were using some common or related source or sources. Miskawai refers to Pythagorean views. But of course, as you know, how do they know about Pythagorean views is a mystery, and they may have rather strange understanding of Pythagorean views. Interestingly, Miskawai, at least at first view, does not seem to attempt to link human justice and natural justice. That is to say, the Aristotelian and non-Aristotelian accounts, whereas I think that al-Farabi clearly does. He, in fact, uses both accounts in at least one and the same text, the selected aphorism. My paper has three parts. The first attempts to present al-Farabi's account of human justice, as well as to explain why he gave a lesser role to justice as a moral virtue than does Aristotle. The second focuses on his account of natural justice, including divine justice. The third argues that in some texts, in particular the perfect state or the opinions of the people of the excellent city, for ease of reference, I will always call it the perfect state, which is not his real title, but you will forgive me. The second teacher connects the two accounts in order to form a coherent view of justice. Finally, these three parts will, I think, show that al-Farabi's account in unexpected ways is less un-Aristotelian than first it seems. So, human justice and justice is a moral virtue. Though in the Nicomachean ethics, justice is a moral virtue, plays an important role in being the only of the moral virtues to occupy a full book. Al-Farabi at times, in places, we expect him to talk about justice as a moral virtue, simply ignores it. Strikingly, directing attention to the way of happiness, the tanbih, which scholars have argued shows clear influences of the Nicomachean ethics, does not even mention justice, while treating of the need to acquire moral virtue before beginning the study of logic as prerequisite to philosophy proper. These introductory texts present a pre-philosophical ethics and list 6 moral virtues as examples of virtue, being mean between 2 excesses. These virtues are courage, generosity, self-control or temperance, urbanity, honesty about oneself, and affection. This list includes the 2 other cardinal moral virtues, courage and temperance, but completely skips the 3rd, justice, which anyway seems far more important than urbanity, for instance. McGuinness and Reisman, in their 2007 English translation of this text, point to this absence of justice. They say it is significant that al-Farabi does not reproduce Aristotle's discussion of justice. But they cautiously refrained to explain what is the significance of this omission. In 2021, I also pointed to the oddity of the absence of justice in this list. Still more recently, Matila brought new material for the strangeness of justice absence in this list by showing that this same omission occurs also in another list of moral virtues given in another text, the selected aphorism. Aphorism 18 to give a list of moral virtues as illustration of the view that moral virtues are a mean between 2 excesses. This list includes temperance, generosity, and courage, among a few others, but completely skips justice. The constant exclusion of justice from these 2 lists does not seem an omission due simply to absent-mindedness, be it that of al-Farabi or that of some scribe. Yet one may wonder whether the context of virtue is a mean in an introductory text, the tanbih, and in a brief aphorism may not have led the second teacher to drop it, as Aristotle tells us that, I quote, justice is not a mean in the same way as the previous virtues, because it is concerned with the mean. It's in 5.5. Explaining how justice meanness, if you like, differs from that of the other moral virtues would have led to complex explanations the context did not warrant. This may explain why, by contrast, in aphorism 8, we find a third list of examples of moral virtues, this one not linked to the view that virtue is a mean, which this time includes justice beside courage, temperance, and generosity. One may add, to highlight the minor role played by justice is a moral virtue that the political regime or principles of the beings in the second part, devoted to life in society, never speaks of justice. Matila also indicates that al-Farabi does not pay attention to friendship, which occupies no less than 2 full books in the Nicomachean Ethics, and of which, on the other hand, miskawai means good use in the refinement of character. I have hinted that there may be a link between omission of justice and a lack of proper awareness of other people at a pre-philosophical stage. In his presentation of the allegory of the cave in the Didskalia in Rhetoricam Aristotelis, a text of Farabi that we have only in Latin translation, al-Farabi indicates that as long as one has not fully emerged from the cave, as long as one has not become a true philosopher, one has neither proper self-knowledge nor proper knowledge of one's fellow human beings. Such proper knowledge of fellow human beings may well prevent proper practice of true human justice. After explaining why justice as moral virtue seems to play a minor role in al-Farabi, and why this minor role may not be as un-Aristotelian as it seems at first blush, we need now to look at what the second teacher says about human justice. The selected aphorism gives a scattered passage relevant to an understanding of justice. Aphorism 62 gives a first definition of justice, which is rather narrow, and is the one operating in the excellent city. I quote, "Justice first has to do with dividing the shared goods that belong to the inhabitants of the city, sharing them among them all. Then, after that, it has to do with preserving what has been divided among them. Those goods are security, wealth, honors, ranks, and the rest of the goods it is possible for them to share in. For each one of the inhabitants of the city has an allotted portion, chist, of these goods, equivalent to what he deserves." Notice that is dividing and preserving. What for justice must be the mean is the amount of the allotted portion, the famous kist, that will appear in many texts, of shared goods in the city, this amount being according to desert. This notion of allotted portion, as I say, is very important, as it is, as I hope I shall show, a way to link the account of human justice to that of natural justice. How this amount of allotted portion of shared goods is preserved despite change is explained at some length in what concerns the city. The fairness of the allotted portion may be looked at in regard to the individual or to the city or to both. This, of course, recalls Aristotle's understanding of distributive and corrective justice. Two aphorisms further down, al-Farabi gives a broader definition of justice, of which the former was auspicious. Aphorism 64. One may speak of another broader kind of justice, namely, a human being performing acts of virtue, any virtue whatever, with respect to what is between him and someone else. Just the justice having to do with dividing and the one having to do with preserving what had been divided is a species of the more general justice, and the more particular is called by the name of the more general. The generic definition of justice makes it clear that justice implies all the other virtues, a claim that Aristotle and Plato share. It also links justice to a relation with another human being or with a group of human beings. And aphorism 61 indicates that justice follows upon love, muhabbat. Aphorism 74, though it raises some problem of interpretation, there is textual problem, does indicate that what is according to organization, nizam, and justice based on desert, and anything reached through desert and justice is good. This passage again link desert and justice. Aphorism 28 introduce a distinction between true justice and what people may consider to be just. Therein, al-Farabi explained that even if in a city, citizens help each other to obtain what they deem to be the good, and therefore perform apparent just acts, such acts, in fact, are not really just, as the citizens pursue wealth or pleasure, rather than the true good or real happiness. True justice requires that the citizen pursue the true ultimate good rather than inferior goods such as wealth, pleasure, etc. Aphorism 76 points to the same distinction between true justice and what looks like it, but is not it. It indicates that if just acts are not performed for their own sake, but rather for some advantage, they are not really just acts. Later on, in our third part, we will deal more in depth with false view of justice and their link to false views of nature. In the meanwhile, we need to point out that for al-Farabi, having a correct notion of justice is so important that it justifies just war. The attainment of happiness explains and justifies just war against those who do not do what would lead to their true happiness. It's number 43 in Magdi's translation. The latter is the craft of war, that is, the faculty that enables him, the excellent ruler, to excel in organizing and leading armies and utilizing war implements and warlike people to conquer the nations and cities that do not submit to doing what will procure them that happiness for whose acquisition man is made. For every being is made to achieve the ultimate perfection it is susceptible of achieving according to its specific place in the order of being. Man's specific perfection is called supreme happiness. And to each man, according to his rank in the order of humanity, belong the specific supreme happiness pertaining to his kind of man. The warrior who pursues this purpose is the just warrior, and the art of war that pursues this purpose is the just and virtuous art of war. There's some textual problem with this, and the two editions of the text are not perfectly symmetrical. The Yassin and the Hyderabad. The selected aphorism is presented as various important but scattered points about human justice. It mainly focuses on political philosophy and the broader and narrower definition of justice address human justice. Yet, even in this text, some aspects of natural justice are adumbrated. Aphorisms 37 and 53 touch about it by focusing on the famous notion of allotted portion, twist, present in the narrower definition of justice, as we show in Aphorism 62. Aphorism 37 indicates that wisdom discovers the first cause and its attribute, such as one and true. It then speaks of the other beings which derive from the first. It says, in addition, we know how all the other beings have derived from existence, truth, and oneness, and what is the allotted portion of existence, truth, and oneness each possesses. Aphorism 53, recalling that wisdom tells us about this allotted portion pertaining to all beings, applies it to human beings in specifying what it entails for them. Aphorism 53. Moreover, it is wisdom alone that knows the first one, that from which all the other beings derive excellence and perfection. And it, wisdom, knows how excellence and perfection derive from the first, and how much of an allotted portion of perfection each one of the other beings gains. Now, the human being is one of the beings that derive perfection from the first one. Therefore, wisdom knows the greatest perfection that the human being derives from the first, namely happiness. Let us add to all that the perfect state too distinguishes between true and false conception of justice, as I shall explain later on, but does not say much about justice as a moral virtue. It simply lists a natural inclination to justice among the 12 natural dispositions that someone fit by nature to eventually become an excellent ruler should have. I quote, He should by nature be fond of justice and just people, and hate injustice and unfairness and those who practice them, giving himself and others their due, and urging people to act justly. He should lend his support to that he considers to be beautiful and noble and just. He should not be reluctant to give in, nor should he be stubborn and obstinate if he is asked to do justice. Notice that here al-Farabi simply speak of a possible future ruler's natural inclination to what this possible ruler takes justice to be. Notice that in order to become an excellent ruler, this future ruler will need to reach a true understanding of justice, and then moves from this natural inclination to the virtue of justice. Part 2, Natural and Divine Justice. In Nicomachean 5:7, Aristotle introduced a distinction between conventional and natural political justice. But what exactly he means by natural justice still puzzles scholars. You can look, for instance, at a recent article to 2014 by Peter Simpson. On the one hand, the Greek indicates it is, I quote, that which everywhere has the same force as does not exist by people's thinking this or that. And what is by nature is said to be unchangeable and has everywhere the same force. Is fire burns both here and in Persia. So to explain what natural political justice is, in fact, Aristotle gives an example from the world of nature. But on the other hand, a bit further down, it is also said to be changeable. That's why there are so many puzzles among people, because it says to be unchangeable, but also in some way changeable. So that's the problem. The Arabic version begins well, but later on gets muddled and introduced the idea that what is natural, being unchangeable, is linked to a amount of reckoning. The word is either hasb or hasab. And that's not in Aristotle, at least as far as we know it. And the text keeps becoming more and more obscure. So if already people who have the Greek are wondering what exactly the text means, and then the Arabic translation is still more muddled, heaven knows what the reader of the Arabic made of it. Yeah. Miskawai begins his very structure on justice by saying that, I quote, justice is divided into three kinds: natural, conventional, and divine. There is a justice by choice, peculiar to human being, but it is included in the three previous. Miskawai then dropped this topic and never indicates how this human justice falls under any of the other three. Both the obscurity of the Arabic version and Miskawai's understanding of terms lead me to think that maybe al-Farabi, or one of his sources, already misunderstood what Aristotle meant by natural justice and removed it from the political context. Though as far as I know, and I am ready to stand corrected, I would in fact be delighted to be corrected. Al-Farabi does not use the expression natural justice. I think that his reflections on justice among non-human natural beings correspond to what Miskawai understand by natural justice, and therefore for ease of reference, I have used the expression natural justice in contradistinction to human justice. My explanation of natural justice will incline divine justice. Is for al-Farabi the first cause, acts only by necessity, just as natural beings do. I shall mainly rely on the perfect state and the political regime. And I think Bad al-Fekak, in an excellent article, which is called Alexander's Inaya Transformed, Justice is Divine, is divine providence in al-Farabi, is shown in detail the arguments the second teacher uses and deploys in the perfect state to unify and put in contrast the celestial realm and the lower realm, in contradistinction to what Alexander was trying to do in his own providence. So I think al-Fekak is also a bit on that line. And it's why I have no trouble putting divine justice and natural justice together. Because in some sense, in Farabi, divine justice is natural justice. Much of this explanation hangs on the notion again of allotted portion, as indicated earlier. Let us begin with divine justice, i.e. the justice of the first cause. In the perfect state, Farabi tells us the following. But the substance of the first is such that all the beings, when they emanate from it, are arranged in an order of rank, and that every being gets its allotted portion and rank of existence from it. As all beings receive their order of rank from it, and each being receives from the first its allotted portion of existence in accordance with its rank. The first is just, and its justice is its substance. Further down, al-Farabi indicates that the first justice cannot be understood in the ordinary sense, as it would relate the first to something external to it. Let's recall the more general definition of justice given earlier in aphorism 64. Is the other beings depend on it, whereas the first does not depend in any way on this being and does not acquire anything by emanating and doesn't choose to emanate, and in which way it emanates. Distinguishing the ordinary meaning of justice from that used to name the first cause allows al-Farabi to bypass Aristotle's scorn on those who attribute acts of justice to the gods. Particularly, is for the second teacher, the first is not even aware of the other beings. By eternal emanation, the first not only distribute to every being its allotted portion of existence and its rank, but also preserves it, is the first and narrower definition of justice, human justice, in aphorism 62 had indicated. There is a kind of parallel there. Natural justice ensures the preservation of this allotted portion into the natural realm, while allowing for motion and change, even substantial change. Let us begin with supralunar motion. In 3.7, the perfect state explain how celestial bodies move inside their own sphere. No part of a celestial body deserves more than any other part, any part of its container, but each part of the celestial body must necessarily occupy each part of the container, because the container also, so to speak, deserves to have each part filled by the celestial body. This is only possible if each part of the body occupies each part of the container in regular succession, in order that each part of the body occupies each part of the container at some time and keeps doing so. Therefore, each celestial body will have this motion forever, and its allotted portion will be constantly preserved despite motion in place, and the motion will follow a regular pattern. Moving to sublunar beings in 3.9, al-Farabi explained at length how the notions of allotted portion and desert, or right, can be applied to explain the eternity of the world and the eternity of species. Hylomorphic beings, by their form, have the right, to preserve their existence, and by their matter, the right, to assume another existence contrary to the existence it now enjoys. Is the two modes of contrary existence granted by form cannot be achieved at the same time, one will be assumed for some time and then be destroyed so that its contrary may come into existence. This goes on forever is, it's 3.9, neither of them, matter and form, is a greater right to existence than the other, and neither has a greater right to remain and last than the other, since each of them has an allotted portion of existence and duration. The political regime makes the same claim about form's right in fairly similar terms, but includes kist, the allotted portion, and even justice. It says justice is that each recorded its allotted portion. In a note, Butterworth indicates Justice, McGuinness, and Reisman and Dunn that this passage recalls Aristotle's meteorology, for one, but that unlike Aristotle, al-Farabi uses political terminology here and in the sequel with work like right, merit, and justice to talk about the natural processes of coming into being and passing away. Dealing with the right of matter, the perfect state in its turn introduced justice and tells us, justice herein is then that matter be taken from this and given to that, or vice versa, and that this take place in succession. But because full justice has to be meted out to these beings, it is not possible that one and the same thing should last perpetually, is one in number, but its eternal permanence is established in its being one in species. Once again, there is a parallel in the political regime, which even insists that justice regarding that is evident. This same justice by succession applies as well to the four elements, which constitute the sublunar natural bodies. Very intent on defending the eternity of species ensured by the succession of individuals, the second teacher even indicates in the perfect state that if the succession of individuals of one and the same species by the usual process of generation and corruption would stop for some reason, spontaneous generation would occur to ensure the continuity of the species and of the allotted portion. Moving from continuity in one species, al-Farabi addresses the problem of how to ensure the continuity of all species when some are subordinate to others and therefore may serve as food for superior ones, which could lead at long runs to the suppression of the lower species, which is food. In 3.9, he explained that the succession of perishable bodies ensure justice, even when one body from one species destroys another, as it happens in eating. He generalizes it in the following way. It's 3.9. Justice is to take what the first body possesses of the matter of the other body and to give it to the other body, and to take what the other body possesses of the matter of the first body and give it to the first body. The summary of the perfect state, done probably not by al-Farabi, is rather old and nicely encapsulates what 3.9 intends to explain. It says about 3.9, how the ordering of the persistence of each of the species of the natural beings and of the individuals of each species is brought about. In what way justice manifests itself in the ordering of these bodies, that whatever happens with regard to them happens with utmost justice, precise performance and perfection, that there is neither injustice, nor fault, nor defect in any of them. The political regime completes the picture in showing how the different kinds of natural bodies interact. Political regime number 53. These actions are interwoven in the possible beings and made consonant so that many mixtures are attained from them. However, in coming together, they proceed in keeping with consonance, equilibrium, ittidal, a word, of course, from the same root is adl, and determination by which every one of the beings attains the portion of existence allotted to it by nature, either according to its matter, form, or both. This text also specified that except for the human being, which is not for the sake of any other species, all other possible beings below it, due to their form, are either only for something else, or both for themselves and for something else. If some beings are for the sake of others, and others for their own sake, or for both their own sake and that of others, the political regime indicates that each of these beings has its own allotted portion, which will be respected, and therefore some will not absorb others, as each has its own form, which has its own right. Number 54 in the political regime. Justice is for both allotted portion of being for itself and of being for another, to be accorded together by nature. Now, all these things happen usually, frequently, or rarely. For a thing to come about rarely is a necessary consequence of its possible nature, and there is nothing strange in it. In this respect, and in this way, the possible beings are controlled and governed, and justice proceeds with respect to them, so that each possible being attain its allotted portion of existence according to its desert. All this ensures some kind of harmony in the universe that preserves all species according to their allotted portion. Natural justice is presented in the perfect city and the political regime with an important role and is expressed by the terminology used for human justice. It is striking that the second teacher used this terminology even when he is reflecting on a passage in Aristotle's meteorology, as we saw, and does not seem to find it incongruous. It is not clear that al-Farabi offers a deliberate parallel between natural and human justice, and we need to explain why. 3. The connection between human and natural justice. The close parallels between human and natural justice stem from al-Farabi's conviction that we should live according to nature. Therefore, people in the excellent or perfect city should have the correct understanding of nature and of the interaction between natural beings. People in ignorant cities have a mistaken understanding of nature and the interaction among natural beings, which leads to a false conception of justice. In the perfect state, al-Farabi lists the things in common, which all the people of the excellent city ought to know. Among them, one finds the following. It's perfect state 570. The celestial substance and the attributes of each of them, then the natural bodies which are beneath them and how they come to be and pass away, and that everything which happens among them happens according to precise performance, exactitude, providence, justice, and wisdom, and that there is neither neglect nor deficiency nor injustice among them in any way whatsoever. In the Book of Religion, the second teacher makes a parallel assertion about the opinions of the virtuous religion and how, for instance, they must know how the primary bodies were generated and that some of the primary bodies are the source of all the other bodies and the ranks of these, of how the things the world encompasses are linked together and organized, and that whatever occurs with respect to them is just and has no injustice. Speaking of the ignorant cities, al-Farabi makes clear the connection he sees between false views about the natural beings and their interaction and false understanding of justice. He seems to hold a Stoic view that one should live according to nature, but one, he may not know its Stoic origin, and two, coupling it with an odd understanding of what Aristotle meant by natural justice, he may not see anything strange in integrating it into an Aristotelian framework, very broadly understood. For instance, in the perfect state, when explaining the cities of domination, we try to overcome each other, he tells us. These are the things which are natural, either to every individual or to every group. And they follow closely the nature of the natural beings. But what corresponds to nature is justice, and justice is then identified with superiority gained by force. Justice is to defeat by force every possible group of human beings. And the defeated either loses physical integrity in his defeat and then dies and perishes. And the victor remains alone in existence. Or he loses his position of honor in his defeat and then will survive in an inferior status or be enslaved. So that means the ranks would be changed and eventually there would be an extinction, so to speak, of species. As one conceives of nature, so does one live. Earlier on, al-Farabi showed that some people observing fights between animals and incessant changes in natural beings assume that the aim of life is domination. According to him, such people say, this state of trying to dominate is natural for the being, and this is the nature with which they are endowed. And what natural bodies do by their very nature ought to be done through acts of choice and will by those living which are free to choose, and through deliberation by those who can deliberate. Broadening of the picture, al-Farabi then speaks of people who apply the term justice to actions which conform to the usual understanding of justice, but which are performed for the wrong reason. We saw that in section 1. Here he explained that people who fear to be dominated made some kind of social contract, so to speak, in the past, and so their so-called justice is not for its own sake, but based on fear of being dominated. People apply the term justice primarily to actions which are the outcome of fear and weakness, and when the danger coming from outside makes it imperative. They will think that justice is what they find in their own day, and will be unaware that it's a just fear and weakness. And they will thus be deceived by using the term justice in that way. Who then applies the rule of that so-called justice, either weak and afraid that someone may harm him, with the very thing which he feels himself desiring to do to the other, or is misled. Conclusion. In an interesting article focusing on cardiocentrism, Badr el-Fakak has shown how al-Farabi puts in parallel cosmic, corporeal, and civil regencies. My research, though limited, shows, I think, the parallels the second teacher puts between cosmic, celestial, natural interaction and human behavior when they reflect through knowledge and therefore true understanding of natural justice, as well as when they reflect ignorance and false understanding of justice in nature. All these parallels may seem rather un-Aristotelian, but as we saw, al-Farabi at times makes clever use of what he takes Aristotle to be saying, or maybe even what he wants him to be saying, in order to render alien material fit to enter in an Aristotelian framework broadly understood. He certainly assumed that the cosmos, and in all its aspects, is intelligible, and therefore its various aspects, including human behavior, must exhibit similar patterns.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Anne-Therese Druart from Catholic University of America. Thank you for this nice, interesting paper based on text. So you are giving us some opportunities to discuss some part of your paper. Okay, I will add our friends to the stream, then to have you together. So, I mean, it's the door is open for any questions or any comment. Let's start by Charles. Are you ready? Charles, are you ready?
Am I being heard?
Yeah.
I would prefer to hear my good friend Muqdad first.
Okay.
No, no.
Okay, as you like. Muqdad, tu peux intervenir en français si tu veux. Hein.
Merci.
Problem.
D'accord. Alors, c'est le Cheikh Charles qui décide ici. Allez, cher monsieur Muqdad.
Merci. Merci.
De rien, cher monsieur.
Merci, Thérèse, pour cet exposé, ce bel exposé. J'ai beaucoup appris, c'est vrai. Bon, on croit connaître les textes, mais une fois que les textes sont ramassés, comme ça, on les voit d'une autre manière. Pour le Medina al-Fadila.
Perfect state.
Oui. Bon, est-ce que Farabi, lorsqu'il expose les différentes théories, fausses théories, il parle de qui, en fait? Est-ce qu'il parle des sophistes? Est-ce qu'il parle qui donc ont une fausse connaissance du monde, des êtres, et donc il en tire une fausse connaissance de la justice, parce que c'est la justice, disons, de la police. Est-ce que c'est de qui il parle? Waqalu. Alors, chaque fois, il relâche des opinions. Qui veut-il? Est-ce que ce sont des doctrines sophistes, ou bien y a-t-il aussi des contemporains, ou est-ce qu'il se réfère seulement à des anciens? Voilà. L'une des questions que j'aimerais poser.
C'est une question difficile.
Guess who?
Je crois évidemment d'abord qu'il base ça sur la présentation des différentes cités d'après ce qu'il connaît de la République de Platon. It doesn't give any name.
No.
It seems to be what we know by experience. If you know a bit of history, the city of domination, we all have some sense of it. So I think he's trying to generalize there that if you want to have a true understanding of justice, it must fit your understanding of how the whole cosmos works. Because I think he assumed that the cosmos is intelligible, and therefore we can understand it. He wants to claim that these patterns are eternal. Therefore, he wants to defend the eternity of species and things of that sort. He knows that you have to explain the motion of the planets and of the apparent motion of the stars and all that. And those recurs. At some stage, he was alluding to phenomena that happen very rarely. I mean, a solar eclipse doesn't happen every 2 weeks. And there are still more complex motion of apparent motion of the stars and so on that may be observed only every 300 years or something like that. So I think he wants to say you have to be coherent. Your moral value must in some sense fit with your understanding of how this cosmos works. And I think he's very serious about that. It's also that on what would you base your understanding of what is really just? on some kind of natural inclination to justice, but it seems that some people have rather strange inclination to justice, or what they call justice.
Since we're among friends, let me follow up Muqdad's question by putting what I think he's trying to say in a different way.
Okay.
We have two teachers who stand out in our lifetimes. One is Richard Walzer, whom you have relied upon very heavily with the dependence on the perfect state. And the other one is Muhsin Mahdi. They did not agree with each other about how to read al-Farabi. And the difference between them, I think, is that Mahdi would deny your premise. He would deny the premise that what al-Farabi is trying to do is to put forth a view of the universe or the cosmos in any particular manner. Rather, what if I've understood either one of these people correctly, is happening is that different opinions of what the cosmos or the universe is and all other things are set forth. It could be my own shortcomings, but I have not yet found the position of al-Farabi in all of this, except as a position of aporia, as a position, or even worse, as a position of ignorance at the end.
Okay. I did not make use really of Walzer commentary on the perfect states. I used the perfect states, but I didn't use his commentary, so I am not necessarily following Walzer. I didn't look at all the Greek sources he wants and all that. I think he saw, Walzer so rightly, that there was some parallel between the way al-Farabi explained natural justice and his presentation of that at the supralunary level and so on, and the way he speaks of justice. So that, yes, if all that is simply all he says about trying to explain the eternity of species and the motion of the planet, or no, regular motion and so on. I think he really wants to explain that. We are a bit hampered there because most of his physical knowledge, what he wrote on physics, we don't have it. So we have to do with what we can. And of course, that hampers very much our understanding. But,
Muqdad, allez-y.
Est-ce que je peux poser, donc, est-ce qu'on peut dire la chose suivante, c'est que une mauvaise ou une bonne conception de la justice, disons politique, au niveau de la cité et sa réalisation dépend de notre conception du monde et de la justice ou de la non-justice du monde. Si bien que la justice dans la cité vient compléter toute la justice, en fin de compte, aussi bien cosmique que dans un schéma de continuité. On peut dire ça, au moins dans Al-Madin al-Fadla. Une mauvaise conception du monde donnerait une mauvaise conception de la cité.
Because je crois qu'il y a un peu à l'arrière-fond, mais je dois aller voir plus précisément, qu'il y a du galien derrière ça. Parce que Galien dit qu'il y a une justice entre les parties du corps. Et partout, je crois que le fait qu'il y ait tout le temps ces parallèles, et c'est ça que j'ai trouvé très curieux, je ne m'attendais pas à combien il y avait de parallèles entre parler de la justice humaine, politique ou comme vertu morale, et la présentation de ce qui se passe dans le cosmos. Et on trouve ça dans différents textes. And sometimes one text focuses more on something, one aspect, but you usually find somewhere a little sentence that reminds you of the other. So I think he certainly wants a unified understanding. Now, does he think that he may not be unaware of the view of the Stoics to act according to nature, which is very famous among the Stoics? I know they don't know much about the Stoics, and what they know, we don't know how they know it. But Plotinus and other people were talking about the Stoics, so they may have some idea of that formulation. But I found it interesting that he has this parallel and that he insists that the people of the ignorant cities or any mistaken city have the wrong conception of justice, but they have also the wrong conception of what's going on at a more general level. So I think there is something to be said that Farabi is too intelligent to think that everything is resolved.
No.
That's for sure. But I think he has a presupposition that on the whole, we should be able to explain everything by rational means. And that it's why he wants a parallel between a proper conception and understanding of all the physics of the world, so to speak, and of politics and moral values. But I think is much more serious, and already some of the commentators had been going a bit in that line. So he's not taking it out of a hat, so to speak. Is that I would agree, Charles, that he's quite sure that not everything has been explained and that there are lots of things we still need to know. But I think at least he aims at it as an ideal that maybe not yet, and is not yet attained. But he thinks that for the satisfaction of the mind, everything should be able to go into one and the same framework.
Yeah.
That
Let me just pose it in a very simplistic way. Over and over in your paper, you referred to al-Muallim al-Thani, the second teacher. But one of the things that we often do is we refer to the same person, Abu Nasr al-Farabi, as being beholden to Plato. And I wonder if what we're not encountering in these political writings is his Platonic side, where he purposely sets forth opinions that are incomplete. And it's our task to complete them.
Okay. I think there is some truth in that. But as you know, there is a difficulty to know what exactly he knew about Plato, which is at this time, nobody can solve it, as far as I know. If somebody solves it, I would be delighted. But I think he has a bit the idea that because Plato is such a great philosopher and so is Aristotle, there must be some way to, if both have attained some part of the truth, and the truth is the truth, they must in some way be, at least on some point, compatible, not on all points. But I think is looking for, as far as one can achieve at this point, a complete explanation. He certainly knows that we don't have the complete explanation, not even now. It's not at his own time. But I think he sees it as what we should look for and try to develop. And I think that's why he's interested in doing all these parallels. I think that the parallels are there, that it's clear. And I find interesting that he's saying that the views on nature take nature in a very broad sense, and the views on political ideal life and ethics should somehow match.
Okay. Giulio, do you have any question?
Yeah, thank you. Really. Thank you for your paper. It was really astounding because a lot of elements from Farabi, but I would like to focus on Alexander Aphrodisias' Inaya, and so pronoia. This is a question of clarification.
I expected your question, Giulio.
Yeah, thank you. Because I didn't know this article. A lot of people worked on Alexander's on Providence, which has a peculiar history of text. And concerning the concept of pronoia, of Inaya, you have, I understood that Alexander's idea of providence is a twofold providence, and he speaks about universals and particulars in order to fill the gap of the Aristotelian distinction between the upper world and the lower world. Thinking about
to al-Fakak, that's not the case. That, on the contrary, Alexander would have said that providence apply only to the sublunary world.
Only to the sublunary.
He would have emphasized the gap. While according to al-Fakak, and in function of the text, he quotes, and he used nearly only the perfect state of the opinions of the people of the perfect city.
Yeah.
On the contrary, there, Farabi tries to put the supralunary world and the sublunary world in contact, and to apply what you could call a providence, but not in the religious sense, because of course Farabi's God is not a person of God, and so it is not aware of what's going on, but that it would be this reflection, if you like, and that it goes over all that. If you want the reference to al-Fakak article, which is very well written. And it's, you should have known, in documenti studi, tradizione filosofica medievale. Come si fa? Che non lo
Thank you, clear. Okay.
And it's volume 21.
Okay.
the year 2010, and it goes from page 1 to 17.
Ah, great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Pour al-Fakak is written, I think, two important articles where he insists of all these parallels. His other article about the similarities in regencies and so on is also
Okay.
quite interesting. And his whole PhD was about all those parallels between the organization of the human body, between the organization of the cosmos, and so on. It didn't go into what I would call the conception of justice, as far as I remember. But he had the collection of parallels all over Farabi. I was one of the readers of his PhD. So I know
Okay. I will read. I will read it. I will read
I
it.
don't know what happened. It didn't seem, at least I have never seen any other article by al-Fakak.
Okay.
And I think he abandoned the Académie, which I think is a pity because I thought his texts were very good. And for instance, he was the first one who had the courage to tackle this awful text by Farabi, which I have not tackled, about the supposed refutation of Galen, who was criticizing Aristotle about the parts of the animals.
Yeah. Luis, please.
So,
okay. Sorry. Go ahead, Luis.
Thank you, Fuad. Thank you very much, Therese, for your talk. I noticed that in most of the passages you have in your handout, al-Farabi uses the term qist. And I was wondering whether there are some passages where he uses the term adl or another synonym for justice, because perhaps the sense of these terms would make a difference when searching for the meaning of justice in al-Farabi. So I don't know whether you have detected passages where he uses adl or another. There are many synonyms for justice.
he used adl, adilat.
Mm-hmm.
Then I think I should go, if I want to go further with that research, itidal and all that. And there is a lot of terms he's using all the time. But I was surprised by the number of times he used Christ, which is a Quranic term.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So I was struck by that, because he could have said a portion, there are other terms he could have used. And it's nearly always that one. And it appears all over the place. So, but I think you have all these terms. For instance, al-Fakak, that I am not agreeing so much. He thinks he indicates passage in which Farabi carefully use, when he speaks of the ancient and so on, he may use the term inaya for providence, but he claims that when he speaks in his own term, it's always adl. But there is one passage which I quoted, and apparently you have the handout, in which he used both, one after the other. So that may be the exception that confirms the rule, as we say in French, where grammatical rules have many exceptions. And when you are it and you complain about all these exceptions, they tell you that the exception confirmed the rule. So
yes, actually, qist in Arabic is one of the synonyms of adl, of justice. Yes.
Yeah, that's right. But it may have different connotations.
Sorry, Luis. Sorry, I can't hear you.
No, I know that are synonyms, but I think that in some cases they have a little bit different connotations.
Yes, sure. There's,
I was intrigued there
Yes.
is no this treatment of justice as a moral virtue. That's very interesting. But in some cases, taql is something similar to pist or adl. So it may be that in some places he doesn't use the term or something equivalent to justice, but he may be using some sort of metaphor that could be equivalent or a sort of symbol to justice, and I think that's very interesting.
But in some passage, he seems to use justice as respecting the Christ.
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
in this case, Christ is the, let's say, the portion, or
I think in most cases he was using, because of the context, I translate it as an allotted portion, because I think that's what he was really meaning. But thank you for that remark, Louis. I will have to look more carefully to see if, in fact, in some context, he could use Christ to mean justice, and not simply the allotted portion that justice distributes and conserves, so to speak.
Yeah. Okay. Any further question? Muqdad, Charles? Oh, go ahead, Muqdad. Go ahead.
Deux questions, en fin de compte. Puisque Farabi a critiqué la théorie de Adl chez les Mu'tazila, est-ce qu'on trouve quelque part une allusion, une critique
de
la justice?
Que ça existe, mais
vous avez commencé votre exposé par une critique, l'idée que Dieu est juste. C'est qui? C'est Farabi qui le fait? Il critique?
Non, j'ai suivi Aristote qui se moque dans un passage de l'éthique Nicomaque de ceux qui attribuent des actes justes.
Voilà, c'est repris ça, oui. C'est repris.
Au Dieu.
Oui. Alors,
la façon dont Farabi comprend la justice divine est évidemment un peu inhabituelle. Mais il le fait très soigneusement. Et spécifique. On ne doit pas comprendre la justice de Dieu au sens ordinaire.
Non, au sens théologique. Donc. Ce que je voulais montrer, c'est que quand même, chez Farabi, bon, il y avait ces sources platoniciennes, il y a cette typologie platonicienne, elle est claire, mais il a travaillé beaucoup avec ce que, bon, en exagérant, j'appellerais, il a fait une sorte, il y avait les hérésies, il y avait des hérésies, il voulait parler d'une certaine hérésiographie des villes. Alors, al-Mubaddila, al-Fasiqa, tout ça, si on prend ces villes-là, il y a des composantes philosophiques, des traditions philosophiques, c'est le chef, les actes, les opinions, et c'est curieux parce que c'est la destinée de toute la cité. C'est ou la disparition, ou bien le châtiment éternel. Il y a des éléments quand même repris par Farabi pour faire toute une combinaison avec pour ces cités. Je pense c'est inspiré un peu des sectes qu'il connaissait bien. C'est pour ça que j'ai posé la question, son rapport, sa critique d'une justice théologique et tout. Donc, mais ça, je suis tenté, en exagérant, de parler d'une hérésiographie des villes. Selon les composantes, alors les actes, c'est pour ça que j'ai posé la question si vraiment les opinions qui déterminent les actes, mais ils ne sont pas souvent solidaires. On peut avoir des actes, on peut avoir des opinions, mais ça, c'est qui ça? Lorsqu'il parle de Fesq, par exemple, c'est lui quand même qui a des opinions justes sur Dieu et tout, mais qui se comporte mal. C'est exactement la définition de la ville. Donc, on est tenté de quand même d'intégrer d'autres éléments de l'histoire qu'il a vécu, qu'il voyait, qu'il observait bien, qu'il pouvait observer.
Oui,
donc,
ça, je crois que Farabi, qui très souvent
c'est ce qui a manqué à Valzer.
défend
Pardon?
C'est ce que Valzer n'a pas fait. Valzer, dans sa traduction, n'en a pas tenu compte, je pense.
Mogdad, c'est le dernier livre que Valzer a écrit. Et ça devait être complété quand il est mort. Il est mort tout de même dans ses 80 quelques. Et s'il y avait quelqu'un, il avait parfois tendance à tout réduire, si on veut, aux sources grecques. Et il ne s'en rendait pas compte. Parce que certaines personnes lui ont dit, et j'étais là, et il ne s'en rendait pas vraiment compte. Mais il avait tout de même un amour de la recherche qui était remarquable, parce que la dernière fois que j'ai vu Valzer, il était sur un lit d'hôpital chez lui, et il est mort 2 ou 3 semaines après ça. Et Valzer était là avec toutes sortes de tubes, et il m'a donné une conférence sur y avait-il des hôpitaux chez les Grecs, ou est-ce vraiment une invention de l'Empire islamique d'avoir des hôpitaux? Et moi, j'essayais de partir parce que je me disais, bon, il n'est pas bien, c'était clair avec tous ces tubes, etc. Mais j'ai trouvé que c'était vraiment pousser l'amour de la recherche très loin. Mais
merci.
Je crois que nous ne saurons jamais tous de quoi quelqu'un comme Farabi savait ou était au courant. Combien il était au courant. Parce qu'il y a des tas de choses qui ne s'écrivaient pas, d'autres, les écrits ont disparu. Je suis sûre que Farabi est quelqu'un de son temps et que très souvent, il fait des allusions à des faits spécifiques que les gens qui étaient autour de lui auraient immédiatement reconnus, mais que nous ne reconnaissons pas. On ne philosophe pas dans un vide.
Non, tout à fait.
Et Farabi ne voulait pas du vide.
C'était anti-vacuiste.
That's why I suggested earlier that maybe history isn't all that important. When one lives under dictatorship, تغلب, one understands what it is.
Yeah, sad.
Unfortunately, we in the United States are starting to see that.
Et aussi, on a le
We
problème.
will not talk about the Arab world. Huh?
Oh no.
No room.
You can talk about the United States instead.
Yeah.
We're going to have a national divorce now. The red states from the blue states.
I'm so happy, but anyway, it was wonderful to have, all of you together around this nice paper presented by Anne-Therese Druart. Thank you so much, Therese, for this. It's wonderful.
Thank you. And thank you for inviting me. And
No,
it's fun to see you guys there and to meet a young scholar.
Yeah, that's good. It was intended. To.
What are you working on, Giulio?
Now I'm working on Alexander Aphrodisias, the pseudo-Alexander of the Kindi Circle, في التدبيرة الفلكية, the Providence, the Kindi Circle Providence. Yeah.
But
Okay.
je pense
There are two short questions. I mean, from a young scholar from the US. He said, I have two quick interrelated questions. First, can you talk more about where al-Farabi situates justice in his scheme of virtues and how he talks about the sources, ends, and classification of virtues in relation to justice? This is the first question. The second, some ethical writings of the time, primarily in adab, hold that reason, not sure how it is defined, is the beginning of virtues and justice their end. Can something similar be attributed to al-Farabi?
Oh, it's a difficult question. The first one, because Farabi didn't write much about ethics. And so it's limited. It doesn't present, something systematical, at least in what we have. He may have done, but we don't have it. Probably one of the best approach to Farabi's ethics is the very recent book by Matila. I don't dare to pronounce his first name because he's a Finn, and Finnish is a very odd language, so you cannot recognize first name. It's written like Jan, but I don't think it's pronounced Jan. It's a guy. I mean, with Finns, you never know.
That's for sure, yeah.
So I would recommend it. It's about Ibn Sina and Farabi, and it came out last year.
Okay.
So that may help you a bit, but it's still quite limited. About the adab, I would like to know what word they use to speak of reason. Do they mean by that practical reason? That would be more logical. In that, for Farabi, you would have to look, but it's not very enlightening because it's very brief, to his letter on the intellect when he tries to define what is meant by intellect, which is in fact practical intellect, in the Nicomachean Ethics. But it's a bit sketchy. Generally, those philosophers don't seem to be terribly interested in ethics. So I don't know.
Okay.
You reach justice by using practical reason. That, I think, is the case.
Okay. Thank you so much for this nice presentation. Shall I end the broadcast and then we